Audio is sometimes called the theater of the mind. And what that means is it's the same feeling almost as when you're reading a book. And people always say the book was better than the movie, it wasn't what I had in my head. You build up this personal relationship when you're forced to use your imagination. Audio does that too. When you listen to an audio show, what you are seeing in your head, no one can take that away from you. If we gave it visuals, you wouldn't necessarily have that.
My name is Elisa. If you've never met me, my name is Elisa, and welcome back to Sunday Morning Juice. Today, I'm here with Roshan Singh Sambhi, lead producer, writer, and assistant director of DC High Volume Batman, the audio drama podcast. Also, the founder of multimedia company Ondas Productions. So, I have to know, do you think people listen better than they watch?
My God, right off the gate with the hard-hitting questions. Oh wow. I think people on average need generally to listen closer than they watch. It's tough in this medium to second screen audio, which I know sounds weird given that that's kind of one of the big sells of audio is you do it while doing something else. But um, I do think that because audio tends to be, especially audio dramas and audio fiction, they tend to be so deep immersive, and there tends to be such a hyper focus on detail and voice. Um, People don't ignore it the way you can completely check out of a TV show that you're watching and have it on in the background. Like audio is kind of, I guess, literally in your face, if to the side of your face.
In your brain?
Yeah, it's inescapable, I think. But yeah, that's you asked me a very provocative question, and I guess that's my provocative answer.
I mean, I definitely find myself when I'm listening to podcasts or anything like that, rewinding all the time. I'm like, oh wait, this is good, and I wasn't even listening that
Yeah.
intently.
Yeah, I mean, it's a really interesting design challenge, not to get too nerdy too fast, but
Go ahead.
I'm a big accessibility freak. So I really care about trying to get ahead of imagining what the listener experience is like. That manifests in a couple of ways. One thing is like I tend to insist on subtitling being an option for stuff we do, precisely because of what you just said of like losing your place. If you go to DC High Volume Batman on YouTube, for instance, you'll see that like we actually have custom subtitles for every single episode. In fact, something I'm pretty proud of that just came out. We also did the subtitles for the Sonic the Hedgehog audio drama that just came out. Probably by the time this episode airs, the first episode will be out. And it rules. We also were kind of blessed to work with Sega's localization team, who took our subtitles and made it so that people who listen to, I saw the list, it's like 15 languages long. You can just turn on that language, and our English language subtitles to the audio drama are automatically like, yeah, like you can listen to the thing with subs in a host of languages. That's all one tiny point, which is I love accessibility. Subtitling is important for the issue you described, but then also, if you zoom out from that, when we're scoring the thing musically, when we're sound designing it, a conversation we do often have is like, can you follow the emotional and dramatic thread of the show, of the episode, even if you checked out of the words? Like, are we kind of creating like bowling alley guardrails so that even if your ball of attention just kind of goes off the side, can we bounce you back to where you need to be without like straining you? And I kind of love that. Like, nobody ever talks about that. I think it's very rare for people who work in audio storytelling to be given like a platform to be like, here's all the stuff we're doing. Like, you don't really get to think about. It's a bit of a black box sometimes, which on one hand is cool. I think people don't know how much this medium is capable of. But on the other hand, it's a shame because craft is always best when it's just out in the open. And maybe that's my way of saying thank you for having me on the show, Alyssa.
It's my pleasure. So would you say that using that scoring helps you helps you make up the visual part that's lost
Mm,
sonically?
mm.
Totally.
Yeah.
That's so
Yeah,
cool.
I think so. I mean, oh, and now you're touching on my heart. I think there was a phrase you just used, which was "what is lost visually," that touches on, I think, my obsession as a creative, because I would argue that nothing is lost visually in a concrete sense. When we look at a film, for instance, do you say, well, the film's not a game, so a film is a game without the interactivity? And we generally don't say that. You know, we understand that in film, something is gained by letting you focus on a linear narrative. And at the same time, by introducing interactivity to games, you open up different forms of storytelling. It's a lateral move, right? Like it's not like an upgrade or a downgrade. And I think I tend to encourage people to look at audio and its relationship to visuals, not so much as an upgrade downgrade thing, but again, like as a lateral move, which is to say, like side to side. And the question I ask based on that is it possible that something is gained because audio doesn't have visuals? And to me, what's gained is this kind of like imaginative element. Audio is sometimes called the theater of the mind. And what that means is it's the same feeling almost as when you're reading a book. And people always say the book was better than the movie, it wasn't what I had in my head. You build up this personal relationship when you're forced to use your imagination. Audio does that too. When you listen to an audio show, you what you are seeing in your head, no one can take that away from you. Nobody will have the same thing as you in that moment. And you end up feeling like it's all yours, you know? And that's, if we gave it visuals, you wouldn't necessarily have that. And if I could launch into my big nerdy thesis on this topic, I think that audio is actually at the center of like three different mediums. So for the audio listeners, I'm drawing a little triangle with my hand, and at each point, film, theater, and books. And I think it has a strength from each. Not all audio projects are like all three at once, but they can like tap on, they like fall in different parts of it. Like you have audio projects like my first project was a more like of a theater piece. We adapted it from play into an audio drama. In that case, it was very much like intimate conversations. You're looking at like almost like the front row seats, like voyeurism that you kind of get in theater, where you're right there, right next to people who are talking, and you kind of feel like, oh, at any moment they could look at you, and you go like, oh no, don't look at me, I'm not here, do your thing. Like, audio has a little bit of that theatricality in it. It also has like we were just discussing, like prose, and you could kind of, and you get this like with recorded audio from stage plays that are sometimes released, which I'm a big fan of. I tend to be surprised by how much they still work. LA Theater Works does a lot of these. On the other side of that, I think you get something which is closer to like DC High Volume Batman, which I think of personally as like a film play. Because there are explosions, there are freeze ray guns, there are guys falling off buildings and other guys who are like swooping in. Like there's all that like cinematic pacing and bombast and spectacle. But then also like my favorite parts of DC High Volume Batman are just as often the ones where like you hear Batman kind of going, oh, I'm emotionally vulnerable, but I kind of have to keep going. And I'm Batman. And you're like, wow, Batman, it's so cool hearing you be emotionally vulnerable. We don't usually get that from you in any other medium. Like those sides of it. So yeah, so that's my big theory is I think audio is cool in how fluid it is and being able to shift modes there. Because the polar opposite of everything I just described is like, and maybe the form of audio that most people are familiar with is the audiobook, the pure, the prose. So literally, we're giving you no bells, no whistles, no pacing, no deliberate pacing, rather. And that's changing somewhat these days. I think because more audiobook producers are getting excited by the possibilities of audio, which rules. But at the same time, I think when most people think of an audiobook, they think of chapter 1. This stuff will happen. At the beginning of the story, certain things are happening, and you're like, oh, okay, I'm just gonna like. And what's great even about that is it taps directly into what books do, which is that kind of just complete onus on you to like imagine and lend stuff to it and like build a castle out of what the words are giving you in your head. Um, so yeah, I mean, and like I think what excites me as an audio person, and this is all in response to the idea of visuals and what's lost as visuals, is how often are we doing things that only audio could do? And to me, if we're making a B grade film without the visuals, we're not making the best use of what this medium can do, because you have to believe that someone who is listening could be like taking off their headphones and going like, "Oh my God, I couldn't think of a better way to experience that story." Like even if I saw it as a film, I might prefer what I just heard. And I think unless we approach audio with that feeling, like that could be the coolest thing I've ever heard, and like a full stop. Like I don't need to beg for it to get a film treatment. I'm just happy with what I heard. That's the feeling I think that the people I'm lucky to work with, like we all chase together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love what you said about imagination as well. I genuinely feel like I was like looking out of my window while I was listening and I could see what I was hearing going on. And I'm not even the most familiar with those stories. So it's crazy how
That
that
rules.
translates.
Yeah, could I say you are our ideal listener? We always think like we don't want to just make something for Bat fans. I mean, we want to give something that could make someone a fan. So that rules. I'm so glad you said that.
I'm glad that you answered that. I was actually going to ask you that very short, coming very soon.
Amazing.
So, how do you balance honoring an iconic story like The Killing Joke with the new audio drama experience? Because while while you have an idea of how you want people to experience it, there are those super fans that
Mm.
have big opinions.
I've never so far felt like there's been a big friction between putting our stamp on something and honoring the source material. There's an audio creator that like everybody in our team respects like very very dearly, called Dirk Maggs, and Dirk is responsible for kind of like pioneering superhero sound in audio back at a time where like even superheroes in themselves weren't respected. He's done like Superman stories for like radio and the BBC. He adapted all of Batman Nightfall. He very recently did the Sandman series for Audible. Um, and also like this excellent adaptation of Kingdom Come with Penguin Random House. He's kind of like a powerhouse. And one thing that he said um, in an interview ages ago that stuck with me is that the reason he likes comic book to audio adaptations is because they don't step on each other. Comics and audio don't step on each other. They don't compete with each other. When an audio creator is reading a comic book and thinking about adaptation, you're not generally thinking, how do I one up the visuals? You're thinking, oh, how do I this page rules. How can I make someone imagine what I'm feeling right now when they listen to this thing? You know, like if it's a huge like for instance in The Killing Joke, obviously that's a very dark book, so a lot of the feelings we're trying to invoke are also very dark. And a lot of the splash pages in that are usually like splash pages that are like, oh, that stinks. Oh, that's like, which is still a feeling worth adapting, right? Like I think of Joker in his vacation outfit showing up at the Gordon's home, which is I think to me one of the most unsettling pages of a comic I've read. Still, our challenge becomes like, how do I make someone feel unsettled to that degree? And at that point, like, yeah, it is that kind of thing where like, because we're working with feeling and we're working with something that almost feels like spiritual, we don't ever feel like we're competing with the book. I think sometimes there is this sense, a lot of the stories that we've adapted have had like animated adaptations. For instance, Year One, The Long Halloween, obviously The Killing Joke, have been adapted into animation before, and there is kind of a sense like we do get the occasional comment from people being like, "Oh, you know, like I watched the animated film. Maybe I'll give this a shot," or like, "Oh, you know, they'll directly compare it to the animated film." Um, and I think in cases like that, what our position tends to be is that we are as much as possible, trying to be faithful to the comics. We don't feel like we have anything to prove in that sense. And if there is anything to prove, it's turning people's attention to how excellent the source material is, because they may not be aware of that. Like, we kind of live in this adaptation wonderland right now, culturally, is maybe the politest way of putting it. There's, oh yeah, like every single, if you've watched The Dark Knight, then you probably have some experience with Batman Year One and The Long Halloween, right? Like, there are little bits of these stories that eventually you find your way to and you're familiar with, but no adaptation, or very few adaptations, are ever like A, word for word, or B, like faithful, or trying to be faithful, and that's okay too. But the problem is that what that means is that you have these incredibly powerful, essential stories that kind of get monkeys telephoned into new forms, and 100 people could have they could know exactly what Batman Year One is, and none of them have read it. And that's a really interesting world that we're kind of in right now in that way. And the thing that we think of when we think of all these adaptations is we go like, well, Mazzucchelli and Frank Miller did such a wonderful job creating this mood, and obviously writing these words. Let's show people that these things are worth looking at. And and like, we often think maybe people enjoy a couple of the arcs we've done. Obviously, we can't adapt to every Batman book ever written, as much as our team would love to try. What we hope is that this turns people to going like, well, maybe there's other stuff that's worth checking out, or like, maybe if I've seen the Infinity War movie, I should really check out that Infinity Gauntlet comic, which couldn't be more different in like 100 different ways. But you don't really think about that until I think you get adaptations like this that challenge you into thinking like, oh, maybe there was something that I thought I knew that I actually didn't really know at all. And that to me like re-enchants the world a little bit. It gives you a sense of wonder. And I think like that's super, super important to everything I do and my team does, is we're like, what can we do that makes you feel like the world is a little bit brighter, a little bit bigger than you thought?
How do you guys choose which stories to tell?
Mm. I have to give a lot of credit to the DC Comics team. I think there's kind of like a big brain trust that we have, where obviously there's my co-showrunner, Fred Greenhalgh, there's myself. We also have our lovely, and I cannot stress this enough, I want to like double underline lovely, DC partners, who are Mike Pallotta and Victor Diaz, who are executive producers from DC, who are two of the coolest, best read, and kind of like most passionate people about this stuff you could ask for. And they're just wonderful collaborators. And what we do is we kind of sit down, and we've had the chance to talk like, well, what like, obviously if we're doing like Batman's origins, like, I think Year One, Long Halloween, and Dark Victory kind of present themselves as like the most common like reading order that you get for any new to Batman fans. And then from there you start getting like certain milestone comics ahead of you that like, well, you're gonna have to cover that eventually. Like at some point, you can't ignore the Killing Joke, for instance. There's stuff ahead that if and when we get there are key moments in Batman's chronology you can't ignore. We do imagine ourselves kind of just working through broader goalposts that we need to hit, because this is a character with a somewhat fixed chronology. Fun is what goes in between those fixed points. From that point, we get to have conversations about, well, what needs to be set up. So I'm going to throw like just a hypothetical out there and say, let's say that one day, if we were adapting Hush, which is on the one hand like a big iconic Batman story, on the other hand, it has like almost every single Robin in it, except for Damian Wayne, who is not at play at that point. But it has all of them. You have Oracle being such a major character in it. You just have all these different moving parts, and from there, there is like an arithmetic to it. You're like, well, okay, we're doing major stories. We know what those are. Those major stories have their own requirements, which are setting up a number of people, and we start looking at which characters get us in play. and get the essential qualities of their story told in a reasonable time frame. Because we also don't, as much as we wish we did, we don't have an indefinite runway. And there are comics that we love that we don't always get to hit because we kind of have to, within a certain number of episodes, make sure that we are giving people kind of everything they need to know to, as you know, to follow along the story, and to one day, fingers crossed, but one day eventually give you the essential reading order that takes you up to like modern day Batman, and the incredible ongoing run by Matt Fraction, right? Like maybe one day. That we don't have centuries for that, which is really the main thing holding us back. So from there we get to like, and I think that's where the really fun discussions happen, which is like, where is there room for Batman egos, right? Like really, really compelling standalone stories that don't necessarily advance the plot, as it were, but which creatively are essential to the character, and which makes sense at that point of the narrative. And at every milestone, whenever a new character has kind of been unlocked in our universe, we get to look again at that broader collection of standalone stories and go, well, now that this person's in play, we could probably take a look at that story, which is the classic. And the final note I'll make there is like, yeah, our DC partners, obviously, I think they do a lot of thinking internally. And like one of my favorite moments was when we were recording the companion show, which was running for parts of last year. I was in the room recording with Koi Jondro. I saw Mike Plata, our executive producer, pulled aside DC Comics' in-house archivist, whose job it is to know everything about DC Comics, to have every issue he hands on. And he's like, hey, I'm just going to talk to him about our episode order. Don't mind me. You guys go do your thing. And I got to see him kind of go, oh, well, what do you think? And looking at pieces of paper. And like, I think that for me was a moment where I'm like, this episode order isn't just vibes. It's like, it's really working with the absolute brain power at DC Comics to figure out what of all the different comics we could do and all the runway we have, the optimal choice. And yeah, they worked their butts off to get that episode order in as good a shape as we could.
You brought something up about modern age Batman. In the writer's room, do you guys ever have uncomfortable conversations about whether Batman is actually the good guy in the modern context?
That's so funny. I would say the recent run of episodes, especially the ones, in Nightwing, in Oracle, we see very complicated sides of Bruce. I think we're seeing him from the perspective of a lot of characters who, in those stories and in those arcs, there's an argument that he fails them in pretty fundamental ways, especially in Nightwing, where one of the bigger critiques of that original story used to be that like Batman felt like he was so severe it was almost out of character. And I think the conversations that we had, which weren't so much heavy in the writing process, because once again with our writing process we move with a sense of purpose. We're like, let's take the comics as they are. We don't judge them. We in fact we love them. And if we don't immediately love them, we must see why they are lovable. Thankfully, I would say we have not had such a deep issue yet. I think we've all genuinely loved every comic, but that is kind of the broader mission is we have to find our in and we have to find our passion. From there, though, I will say in the directing kind of area, when Fred and I talk about like the way Batman is portrayed in Nightwing specifically, we did have a conversation about whose perspective we were seeing. That's our first arc where our point of view character isn't Batman, it's Nightwing. And I think the way we thought about it was some of the some of the really hurtful things we're hearing, some of Batman's coldness and aloofness, are things that are experienced by Nightwing. There's an emotional sharpness to him that is kind of magnified in the moment. And I think what we were thinking was, well, we're not just playing how Batman kind of objectively is. Audio is about perspective. Audio is about being deep dived into somebody's head and their point of view and their mood. And we're in the mood and we're in the headspace of somebody who's having like such a sharp divergence from Batman right now. And it's okay to play to some of that coldness. Because right now we're playing who Batman is in Nightwing's head, which need not necessarily be in the broad Bat canon exactly what was said and done, because that doesn't exist. There's no canon that is immutable. Canon is a dynamic, living thing, often shaped by story perspective already. And in this case, what we're trying to do is honor the story as written. But to answer your point, yeah, I think as creatives, there are often times where we're surprised by Batman. And I think regarding that modern context, I'll say some of that is also about story selection. The stories that you select paint a certain portrait of Batman, too. And while there is a degree to it where it's perspective, there's also another degree to it, which is it's possible through curation of stories to paint very specific portraits of Batman that maybe aren't the ones that we find the most interesting. Right now in the story, we're in a pretty dark part of Batman's life where he's obviously there's a ton of grief. There's a ton of searching for purpose. Nightwing left. Barbara is in a really bad spot, and he's just picked up Jason Todd as a Robin, and unfortunately, we all know what happens to Jason. That's kind of next on the horizon. And then one thing that we do talk about then is are we accidentally telling a story that is about grief, and really just about endless grief? Is that the story of Batman? Is that the story of Batman we want to sort of really highlight? So I think to your question about the writer's room process, I'll say it's not a factor when we're executing a script, but it is something that we sometimes talk about, emergent story, when we're planning our series order. Yeah, I guess that's the answer to that question.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, I like that you guys are looking at Batman's life and his moments as just eras of his life.
Yeah.
There's a lot of discourse from people who don't look at Batman that way, or maybe they don't have the resources, or maybe they like another superhero better and they care about that story better. But
Is
you
valid?
love
Yeah.
Batman.
Yeah.
And I have a question, and I want to know if you can answer this one to your camera.
Sure.
What do you have to say to those who believe Batman just runs around beating up poor people?
Mm. What I would say to that is, I think the way in which Batman's overall mission is something that evolves with the era. I think there was an era of superhero storytelling where I think the day-to-day crime fighting was really emphasized. I think to the point of not giving us much, if any, insight into what he was doing outside of that. I think what you've gotten since then, and especially in the post 2000s stories, are generally, I think that there is a general understanding that what we see Batman do is only part of the overall make the world a better place efforts that Bruce Wayne is doing on the side. Like developing in city infrastructure is something we see him do all the time. Investing in hospitals, investing in social work and rehabilitative processes. We see Batman do those things all the time. They maybe aren't as visually exciting always as seeing him swoosh and punch. But I think, to me, I consider it a fundamental part of the character that at any given time, he is using all of his resources as both Bruce Wayne and Batman to make the world a better place. And I think modern arcs, especially like to me, like yeah, post 2000s, that becomes less of an implied thing and more overt. Like I mean, my favorite thing about him is like his dad's not my favorite thing. There's so many things. I take that back. But one of the things that I keep coming back to is his dad was a surgeon. The heart of Bruce's mission is very often wanting to be like his dad and wanting to save lives. And his dad was this ultimate non-violent, and you get this in like Long Halloween and Dark Victory. He would save the life of like a criminal if it meant saving a life. And we see multiple moments where like Batman breaks down and goes like, "Oh my God, punching people isn't enough." He's had that arc 1,000 times, and to people who I think do feel tired of the wealth element of Batman, I mean, absolute is kind of rules. Like I don't think that's a hot take. It is the best selling comic for a reason. I think there are ways that you can touch on the radical elements of the character that don't involve wealth, but absolute Batman is still Batman. I think the thing that unites them for me is that any Batman it cares about people first and will use everything at its disposal to make the world a better place. And I think that's the aspirational part of Batman. Yeah.
That was a beautiful way to wrap Batman up in a bow. Where can people listen to DC High Volume Batman, and when, and how can they learn more about you?
Yeah. Well, the good news, folks, is you can listen to DC High Volume genuinely everywhere. I struggle to think of a place you can't find it. It is on YouTube. It is on every single podcast catcher. On YouTube, we have this really cool thing. Shout out to Tasha Carter from DC, who is the brilliant artist behind the motion design that you get when watching and listening at the same time. I know I talked a really big game up about how the show is like super, super compelling if you just listen. I think there's a very separate, parallel, cool exercise of hearing the audio against the comics, and that's something that a lot of love went into, and that's how you can watch it subtitled too. And in terms of me, and where you can find out more about me, what we do, Andas is concurrently also putting out our own show right now called Catskull. Catskull is well, the crudest way of putting it is it's kind of like an anti-Crazy Rich Asians Singaporean story. It's a neo-noir thriller following a disenfranchised teen in modern-day Singapore who decides he's kind of had enough. He doesn't see his life going anywhere. So he picks up a baseball bat and he thinks, what if I just hit systemic injustice on the head until it drops? And just do that, literally go down swinging. And the story kind of ends up being about his quest for purpose and what it means to matter and when systems feel like they've completely failed you. And it ends up being a little bit more of a Greek tragedy than a Batman Year One. But yeah, that's a really cool story that we're adapting right now. I think we're currently this week we're 14 out of 25 episodes in. So if you start listening soon, you can catch the final act, which is crazy.
I will link it below. I'm so intrigued.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, we make audio stuff all the time. We make video games when we can. We really care about digital storytelling. We care about platforming voices and stories that you may not have heard before, where a lot of us are from Singapore, but not all of us. Some of us are from the Philippines. Some of us are from all over Asia and Europe. We're kind of just all over the place. And that's how we like it. I think our big thing is that when we're champions of diversity in storytelling, not only because it opens the door for more people, but also I think we fundamentally believe that unexpected stories are compelling innately. I think hearing authentically told stories from people you don't know or places you haven't heard about has intrinsic narrative value, and it just makes for a good time. And I think that's the point that we try to prove in everything that we do.
1000%. It has been so awesome speaking with you today, Roshan.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. You guys, everything will be linked below. ACI Volume Batman. Did listen to Catskull, and we will see you very soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I just took all my boyfriend.